5G, the fifth generation of cell phone technology. Like every next-gen technology, 5G will give your phone a faster connection, allowing you to download a 3D movie, for example, in just 30 seconds. Eventually, sensors, thermostats, cars, robots, and every other sort of device will connect to 5G in one way or another. But is there a dark side to this new technology? Here's 10 reasons why 5G should scare the out of you. Number 10. It scares the out of pigs. In the past, sporting events have helped introduce new technology, such as the high-speed trains unveiled at the '64 Tokyo Olympics. During the Pyongyang Olympic Winter Games, South Korea deployed a 5G network to take care of a nagging problem in their countryside: wild boars. Tens of thousands of them rampage through the potato and carrot fields of Korea's backcountry. Nationwide, 3 people were killed and 21 injured between 2012 and 2016. Using a 5G network as a relay, South Korea is using fast-acting systems that shoot rays, spew gases, emit tiger roars to herd these literal 5G guinea pigs around. Is it possible that 5G networks could be used to herd us like sheep? There's a reason why the term guinea pig is used. Pigs are closely related to humans and are often used in place of us in scientific experiments.
These service personnel, playing the role of an unruly mob at Georgia's Moody Air Force Base, are about to fall prey to an invisible ray. The hulking panel atop this Humvee is part of what the U.S. military calls the Active Denial System, or ADS. It's designed to incapacitate enemy combatants with an unnerving, non-lethal sensation of intense heat. Watch as the ray silently strikes and scatters the crowd.
New wireless technology, 5G. So right now we're at a lower frequency, like 1 to 3 gigahertz. This is now 24 to 90 gigahertz. Just to put that in perspective, 90 gigahertz is 90 billion electromagnetic waves per second hitting and going through your cells every second. That is far from natural. Your heart has a circuit, has electricity to it. Your brain has electricity to it.
The electromagnetic radiation released by the Active Denial System is similar to the microwaves in your microwave oven, in that it causes the water molecules in the target to become excited and heat up. But that's where the similarity ends. The ADS is designed to heat only the very surface of the skin. It does this by outputting only the carefully chosen radio wave frequency of 95 gigahertz.
And 5G is being forced on us. In California, SB 649 is going to make it so they can put one of these transmitters in front of your house.
And some Willoughby Hills council members say the mayor broke the law by approving the project.
And to find out that the mayor had signed it months before the first meeting was held, I think that's just wrong. And frankly, at our December meeting, we asked the mayor, not once but twice, did you sign any agreement with Verizon or the representatives? He said no both times.
Did you sign this lease without consulting residents?
Yes, I did.
Did you sign this lease without consulting residents?
Yes, I did.
Canada and the UK as the 2 remaining members of the so-called Five Eyes intelligence alliance that have yet to make the call about Huawei 5G. Huawei is currently working with Canadian and British mobile networks to test equipment while under the scrutiny of government security agencies. The firm insists it has no ties to the Chinese government, but Chinese tech companies have previously been accused of installing backdoors into technology for potential cyber attacks.
We will make decisions based on facts, on evidence, and on what's in the best interest of Canadians.
Canadians are being ripped off for what they pay for mobile broadband.
Mobile network entrepreneur Declan Ganley is developing technologies to disrupt the current mobile carrier-led marketplace.
Beijing is offering subsidized 5G networks, and the carriers are saying we want them.
Huawei Canada tells Global News, our highest priority is and always has been the security and privacy of the networks that we help to equip here in Canada.
The Huawei case is just one example. There are 10, 15 other issues that Ottawa is having to look at right now.
This expert on Chinese politics says the current US policy of disengaging from Chinese technology is a factor for Canada.
It fundamentally depends on how you define China, as friend and partner, as competitor, or as adversary and enemy.
In the end, Canada's 5G decision will be about more than just balancing Chinese innovation with security, but also balancing the favour of its two biggest trading partners. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
Executive of Chinese telecoms giant Huawei has been arrested in Canada and she faces extradition to the United States. Meng Huangzhu was reportedly detained in Vancouver. Huawei said it was not aware of any wrongdoing. The reason hasn't been confirmed, but the company is said to have been investigated over alleged violations of sanctions against Iran. Well, for more on this, Alistair Sanford joins me in the studio now. Good morning to you, Alistair.
Good morning, Belle.
So what more do we know about this arrest at this stage?
Well, some of the details are fairly thin. We do know that Meng Wanzhou, who is the chief financial officer for Huawei and also the daughter of the company's founder, was arrested on December the 1st in Vancouver. The Canadian authorities, the Ministry of Justice, says there'll be a court hearing tomorrow. Huawei says she was detained when changing flights. And that the charges emanate from New York, and she does face now possible extradition to the US. Now, Huawei is a Chinese telecoms giant, one of the largest makers of network equipment. We don't know about the precise details of the accusations, but media reports and other sources in the US are saying that it's in relation to alleged violations of sanctions against Iran, as you've said. And the New York Times goes further, saying that there's potential violations concerning other countries as well. As for the reactions, well, Huawei says we've got no information on this. We're not aware of any wrongdoing. A particularly terse statement from the Chinese embassy in Canada saying they resolutely oppose this arrest and calling for Meng's immediate release. There's been no comment from the US authorities, but some legal opinion saying, well, this could be correct because when Chinese companies get access to US markets, they sign up to not violating sanctions concerning Iran. And of course, the Trump administration has now reimposed all sanctions against Iran as of last month following the withdrawal from the 2015 nuclear deal.
Well, was arrested December 1st in Vancouver. The U.S. alleges Meng violated its sanctions on Iran. American prosecutors want her extradited to face charges in the U.S. Meanwhile, the Chinese government is warning of, quote, grave consequences if she's not released. And Katie Simpson is here with a look at kind of what that might look like. What is the government saying about this drama that's unfolding?
Well, the Chinese are trying to exert pressure on Canada because they do not like what's going on, and they are targeting Canada rather than the United States at this point because this process is taking place in Canada right now. We've heard from the Prime Minister today, who is digging in his heels and saying that this is not a political issue.
We are a country of the rule of law. We live up to our international obligations, and we trust our courts to do the right thing.
Biological effects, period. This is no longer a subject for debate when you look at PubMed and the peer-reviewed literature. These effects are seen in all life forms: plants, animals, insects, microbes. In humans, we have clear evidence of cancer now. There is no question. We have evidence of DNA damage, cardiomyopathy, which is the precursor of congestive heart failure, neuropsychiatric effects. So 5G is not a conversation about whether or not these biological effects exist. They clearly do. 5G is a conversation about unsustainable healthcare expenditures. Why do I say this? We've been sitting on the evidence for EMR and chronic disease for decades. And now we are seeing all these epidemics appearing. So diabetes is the first epidemic. I think most of you know the statistics. They're very scary.
Is the latest generation of cellular communications targeting high data rates, reduced latency, energy savings, cost reductions, higher system capacity, and massive connectivity. There you go. A bunch of big words that may mean something to you, maybe not. But it does sound impressive, right? Who wouldn't want all of that? Well, some might ask, there's got to be a catch. So joining us now is our correspondent, Michelle Greenstein, with the latest on 5G. And I guess the question would be then, here's the setup, ba-dum-bum. Is there a catch?
There is, just a small one. It might kill you.
Good to know.
So,
stopped at a red light, downtown Red Deer. Red light, downtown Red Deer. I believe that says 49th Street. We're heading north on Gates. So this is just downtown.
And she wrote a book called No Safe Place. You might be aware of Olga, Barry. Olga says, Olga, yeah. Olga says, the plans to beam highly penetrative 5G milliwave radiation at us from space must surely be one of the greatest follies ever conceived of by mankind. There will be nowhere safe to live. And as well as not hearing Barry Trower on BBC television or radio, we don't hear people like Olga Sheehan. That's, everybody in the world should hear that, whether they want to dismiss it out of hand or whether they want to investigate it. The greatest follies ever conceived of by mankind, there will be nowhere safe to live, Barry.
Keep up with the explosive growth. They need the antennas closer to where people are trying to connect so that they will get better coverage. They claim that the small cells have exposure levels similar to baby monitors and microwave ovens.
California City is fighting back at a proposed law that is moving quickly through the legislature. They say it would allow phone companies to put up new antennas in your neighborhood, whether you like it or not. KPXI's Phil Matier in Walnut Creek. And Phil, today you heard some of the opposition in Sacramento, right?
That's right, and a lot of it is based on what you see around us here in Walnut Creek. You're walking down the street in the downtown of your little town, and you maybe one day will look up at a street lamp like this, and sitting on top of it is something totally unexpected. A cell phone antenna. Here's the story.
5G wireless has the potential to be a game changer.
But to pave the way for that game change, telecom companies need to put up between 30,000 and 50,000 of these small cell antennas, including several likely in your town over the next 5 years, but with only limited local say.
Local neighborhoods would be seeing something the size of a refrigerator showing up on a street pole, and they could say nothing to stop it.
A library, a school.
On traffic signals, on light poles. This would give the companies free rein to install these small cells on any public infrastructure, and we would have no ability to say no.
We're also talking about an industry that is a big player in California politics. In the 2016 election cycle, telecommunication companies contribute over $3 million to both California Democrats and Republicans that are now deciding on this bill.
Is you don't want to damage them, because if you damage them, you're going to get things like cancer. Or you're going to die, okay? Because suddenly your ability to make loads of energy stops, and you start making very low amounts of energy. So microwave, millimeter wave technology damages the mitochondria in a time response, dose response way. That's a classic way of proving that something causes harm. Okay, so already we have evidence that it does that. And it damages two particular key enzymes. One's called succinate dehydrogenase, and the other's called cytochrome C oxidase. Now, this is science. This is not someone with a tinfoil hat talking crap. Excuse my French. This is absolutely science, okay? Now, there's a Schumann resonance again, and we talked about that. Now, does anyone meditate here? Well, the frequencies of the Schumann resonance are often quoted very, very similar to the same frequencies in the brain when you meditate, and there's actually studies on it, and I pulled one up there. And therefore, do you really want to be mucking around with these frequencies? And also, we found out, because you've got different frequencies in your brain, that you need to be healthy and to be alive. And we absolutely know that these mitochondria are also involved in doing that as well. See this thing here? This is kind of a diagram of the cell, if you like. You kind of got the center part of the DNA. You've got these little mitochondria floating around in the kind of cytoplasm, if you like. There are 1,000 of them in each cell, and they're communicating and helping to run the cell, keep you alive. If you're going to bombard that with millimeter wave technology, you're absolutely going to disrupt that. So this is the reason why we're very, 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 very worried about this, because the key thing in your cell that keeps you alive is going to be affected by this technology.
The report released by the Naval Medical Research Institute, the bibliography of reported biological phenomenon or effects and clinical manifestations attributed to microwave and radio frequency radiations. This was conducted by the Naval Medical Research Institute and the National Naval Medical Center in October 4th of 1971. A second printing with revisions was released on April 20th, 1972. And it goes on to say here that more than 2,000 references on the biological responses to radio frequency and microwave radiation published up to June of 1971 are included in this bibliography. It goes on to say here, 3 supplementary listings bring the number of citations to more than 2,300. So well over 2,000 studies, experiments, tests, reports were done on the effects of these radio frequencies and microwaves on human beings, and it was all compiled into this one report. And when we scroll down here to find out what sorts of things they were detailing were, the effects on humans psychologically and physically, this is incredibly telling. And here we see a heating of the organs, heating up the whole body, your skin, your bone marrow, the genitalia, tubular degeneration of the testicles, heating of the brain and the sinuses. It goes on and on here. Alterations in the biocurrencies of the cerebral cortex, central nervous system effects. We're talking about headaches, insomnia, restlessness, automatic nervous system effects here, ranging from fatigue, structural alterations in the synapses of the vagus nerve. Psychological disorders include something they call neurasthenia, or just generally feeling bad, just a bad feeling in general. Depression, impotence, anxiety, lack of concentration, hypochondria, dizziness, hallucinations, sleeplessness, insomnia, increased irritability, decreased appetite, loss of memory, scalp sensations, increased fatigability, chest pain, tremor of the hands. It just goes on and on. We go into changes in blood and bone marrow, cholesterol and lipids changes. We see here enzyme and other biochemical changes to your proteins, toxins, fungus, virus inactivations, alterations in the rate of cell divisions. We have metabolic disorders, gastrointestinal disorders. This just goes on, and it just gets worse. Genetic and chromosomal changes, miscellaneous effects, changes in optical activity, loss of hair, brittleness of hair, sensations and buzzing, vibrations, pulsations and tickling about the head and the ears. This is just unbelievable what they've discovered way back in the 1970s.
Cities talk about putting 5G in acres homes and in other places, which are the poorest among us. So if this does roll forward full steam without any study, not only on the health, but we have to think about the privacy aspect. 5G will bring along so many more interconnected devices where privacy will probably be a thing of the past. And these are things that are being talked about for those who looked. But as I said, this is one of the most censored stories of 2018. They compare it to big tobacco spreading propaganda about cigarettes back in the past. That big wireless is doing something very similar now to try to keep people from looking into the implications of these studies. So again, I invite you guys all to check your email. I would invite each of you who are interested, I will email you again. I would love to have any of you to come talk on our show. It's Mondays from 3 to 5. And to share your opinions and your thoughts on this. People are concerned. People are I'm here by myself as a journalist, but other people do have concerns, and they feel kind of like powerless. The mayor just announced last week, first 5G cell. It seems like it's already said and done, like there's nothing we can do about it. But I'm just here to offer an alternative opinion so that in the next 20 years, we don't end up with a bunch of people with cancer in the city.
In the background, while people bicker about politics and what's going to be in the healthcare plan in the U.S., and underneath it all is this rising tsunami that, if we're not careful, is going to wipe us all out.
A very sinister, diabolical, and I think it's very demonic, quite frankly. A lot of people, they don't really like to go there talking about demons. It's not comfortable for a lot of Christians, which is actually kind of convenient, don't you think? And these very, again, seeker-friendly coexist, everybody grab a bumper sticker and let's have a group hug. I think what this does is it just invites everything. No one bats an eye when we have, 5,700 different genders now, when it was like 2 originally. Have all that you said, like tranny gender or tranny humanism. Yeah. because it's comical. It really is getting to the point where we are just, it's like the Twilight Zone, and you can't wake up from this bad Twilight episode. I mean, we're so dumbed down, and the gospel's been dumbed down, and really this whole thing is redefining what it means to be human. Yet, like you just said, all these people are just embracing this. But I really believe there's a demonic undertone. It's very nefarious, and it's going to be one of the ways that we see the Antichrist come to power is through this technology, whatever that looks like. I mean, who knows on the island of Patmos what John the Revelator was really, that vision. I mean, how could you know about an image of anything? We didn't even have images like a camera. I mean, think of an image on a phone. I mean, even basic things like that. When you study out the book of Revelation, how could John 2,500 years ago even know what an image is? You know, so it's very interesting when you study that out in the Koine Greek. It almost seems to be like an AI kind of artificial intelligence. It's really cool to kind of look at, you know, how the Bible is so, you know, the Bible is more accurate than most newspapers nowadays.
Yeah. Okay, we're at the Leduc Farm and Animal Hospital, looking at this tower over here. Just thought I'd walk in front of the windows and see what we're getting. It's about 180, 190 yards from here. So that's pretty ugly. Well, hello there. Hello everything. Considering that this is what would be going through the windows all day. Ugly. It's worse than a Wi-Fi.
That the U.S. National Security Agency collected over 500 million phone records of U.S. citizens last year. That's over triple the number of 2016. And that is despite a new law limiting the spy agency's powers. The U.S. Freedom Act bans the bulk collection of phone records and internet metadata, whilst also limiting government data collection to what is, quote, reasonably practicable. It does, however, permit the gathering of phone and text logs when a link to terrorism is proven. The recent increase in records collected comes in stark contrast to the concerns expressed last year by President Donald Trump.
I think that is a very big surveillance of our citizens. I think it's a very big topic, and it's a topic that should be number one, and we should find out what the hell is going on.
Diagnosis, you guys know who are targeted, and you go to a doctor about it and they just give you the whole you're crazy, write you up, give you a bottle of pills and send you out the door. Okay, we've got the misdiagnosis, we've got the government training. We've discovered that they're turning to a manual that was written by the government, the military, to hide their experimentation that they've been doing on everybody, so that the doctors and the people that went to their universities would not wake up to it and actually figure out that, hey, this person's telling the truth. This is real stuff that's going on. Instead of somebody's in there who's getting hit with V2K, telling them they're hearing voices in their head, and then they're just going, oh, you're crazy, schizophrenia, here's your prescription. And they might figure out that it's actually being done by technology as well. There may be somebody who has a chemical imbalance or some of that going on, or some demonic, oppression, obsession going on. You're not really possessed totally demonic. Most people aren't. Demonic possession is when it has taken you over. It's telling you what to think, where to go, what to eat, what to put on, everything. Most people are not to that point. Okay, we do have a mixture going on at this time because we're in the end of days, you guys.
Talking about how they want these technologies so they can monitor kids in Africa to make sure that they've been vaccinated. You may believe in vaccination, I don't know, but I don't think you should be monitoring people with this technology. Also, ID 2020 is coming in, sponsored by the usual culprits, and effectively they're using this to give everybody an ID. That's what they want to do globally by 2020. I think they're a little bit behind. and they want to be able to monitor you from the cradle to the grave. And they want to make sure that you are doing everything they want you to do. So if they want you to take a drug, you will be monitored for it and measured. This is what this technology is really being ramped up for.
Yeah. These microchips. So what's happening in Sweden?
So basically in Sweden, over the past couple of years, several thousand people have had these little rice grain-sized microchips put into their hands, which contain information that they can use to, say, check into the gym or get into the office or pay for train tickets. On the one hand, everyone can appreciate that that's convenient, right? How many times have you been looking for your key fob at the gym or can't remember your password for something? But I think the bigger question here is, look, as the human body itself becomes a technological platform, right, there are big questions we need to consider about what kind of information is put out about us, from us, quite literally, and also further down the line, what kind of access do other people or platforms have to that information that is inside us, right? This is a biotech question, this kind of blurring of the lines between the human body and tech. I mean, it's one thing if you're holding your smartphone and it's sort of emitting data about you. It's another thing if your own hand is doing the same thing. You know, we'll see. This is 3,000 people. This is a small experiment. It's been developing over the past several years. But as the information that these microchips contains gets more elaborate and more detailed, people may start to change their mind.
Every living thing is defined by its DNA code. The DNA is a long string consisting of 4 different molecules called A, T, C, and G, found in all living cells. So it is, in essence, a digital barcode that defines us as humans, just as it defines every other life form on this planet. Only the variety of combinations of these 4 elements makes us differ from one another. The Human Genome Project was started in 1990 as the largest technological enterprise ever, with a budget far outstripping that of the race to the moon and involving hundreds of laboratories around the world, all with one main goal.
Fundamentally, it was about determining the complete sequence of the human genome, the 3 billion letters that make up our genetic blueprint. And we know we have the code before us, and it's truly remarkable. It is a digital code, and buried within that code is information about what are all the genes necessary for making a human brain, all the genes necessary for making a human liver, or the heart, or any part of the human body. And now the fun stuff begins, because we get to start to crack that code, having the order of the letters in front of us. But fundamentally, it is very much a digital code.
The secret of life itself, the DNA molecule.
With our genes has obvious applications. We can change DNA to prevent or cure hereditary diseases. We can alter the DNA of donor organs that are to be used for transplants so that the body of the recipient won't reject them. The organ doesn't even need to come from a human being. It could perfectly well be that of an animal.
Pigs would be a good supply of kidneys or other organs to transplant in humans. But because of the difference between the two species, the pig kidney or the pig liver will be rejected by the human. So if we can humanize the pig kidney by putting in some human DNA, which will make the cells look a little bit more human, so that they are not rejected by the person immediately, then there's a better chance that you'll have a take. And this is tried to humanize animal tissues, and it's becoming a big industry because we need more organs.
But defiant, Anastasia Lynn is competing for more than just a tiara. In a rare television interview, Miss Canada is using her Miss World platform to shed light on the evils of organ harvesting.
It's like innocent citizens being killed for their organs and their body parts sold for profit. And it's happening, and people need to pay attention to it.
先摘的是心脏，然后再摘的是肾。当心脏的血管剪到一下，它就进行一阵抽搐，然后那个非常可怕的。
When it cut through, blood still come out. That's just to say,
blood still running. That means this person's still alive.
So the question becomes, how has China become the #2 transplant country in the world?
The place where every other country in the world gets its organs, not available to them. Where are these organs coming from?
The staff in the operating rooms are all making a lot of money from doing it. They're not going to talk about it.
出汗的时候也未必知道自己杀的。
It's a new form of evil, it's a new form of abuse, it's something that nobody's ever done before.
This is a crime against humanity.
我想，如果我要找一些确实我的家人，找一些让他们站出来，也许会很多人存活在这个世界上。
The government in China is doing a terrible thing, which is comparable to what the Nazis did.
The secret to eternal youth be found in blood transfusions from young people.
Transfusions with young blood from teenagers, some claim it can reverse the aging process. It's being tested in patients over the age of 35 as part of a clinical trial called Ambrosia.
Ambrosia, a drink that tasted like honey and delivered by doves to the Olympians, was the source of Greek gods' immortality.
A myth dating back 1,500 years tells of several gods fighting over a valued urn of sacred ambrosia. The magical liquid could provide immortality.
Where people paid $8,000 to get the rich growth factors found in blood plasma platelets.
It's pretty much people from most states, people from overseas, from Europe and Australia.
Results of the trial have not been published, but Dr. Jesse Karzeman, who plans to open a business selling young blood, says patients who've had it say they feel amazing. And he says he's seen evidence of reversing the aging process in rats.
It's, again, referring to the Global Migrant Compact, or GCM, as they're now calling it, right? Compact on Migration, which, again, is, yes, a non-legally binding document. However, sets the framework for legally binding laws, i.e. The criminalization, Section 17 of the GCM, mixed with the M103, which will soon be a Bill 103. You won't even be allowed to criticize, ask questions, demand, answers as to where our tax dollars are going. Who's funding these illegal immigrants, right? Who's paying for all these social programs? How are we going to sustain such an economic strain, right? Especially with the way that the carbon tax has already been screwing with us. The green energy policies have been shutting down the Western pipelines, gas fields, steel tariffs, because Freeland and Trudeau decided they wanted to poke the bear and fight with Trump and jab him. So now we are stuck paying steel tariffs on aluminum, on our exports. We got screwed on the USMCA deal, or NAFTA, or not NAFTA, whatever you want to call it, right? More likely, the silence is due to the irrefutable documentation presented on the faux rescue group's involvement in criminal activities, which include organ theft, working with terrorists, including as snipers, staging false or fake rescues, thieving from civilians, and other non-rescuer behavior. And if you remember the other video that I did, there is plenty of photo footage, which we probably will get to in this video as well, showing these white helmets as terrorists as well, right? And
what do you want the Mexican government to do?
To send them back. To send them back and help our people first. Help our people. We're going through a crisis right now. Nayarit, the Sierras in Chihuahua, Sonora, Chiapas. We have a crisis in our hands. And they get more help. After they violated our borders, they get more help than our own people. That's very unfair. I'm not mad at Trump for what he's doing. He's got to defend his country. Well, we got to defend ours from these people, because this is an invasion. This isn't a migrant caravan. Don't get it twisted. It's wrong. This is an invasion. Once you dropped those borders, once you went through those borders with violence, it became an invasion.
There doesn't appear to be any time limit on how long a person can be missing before their clothes and ID are found floating. Some can be missing for days, others for years. Any personal effects that we'd recovered then get sent back to the families or loved ones. While the situation is bizarre, I've never lost much sleep over it. It's all too surreal. Without any bodies or signs of violence, it's easy to brush the darkest aspects of it aside. But this past spring, after the thaw and during the new recoveries, different reports started coming in. Indigenous people within 300-mile range have started showing up in hospitals. Unexplained burns have been found on their skin. Further, the cancer rate among the indigenous people has risen by 400%. I haven't been alone in noticing the new bluish lights seen reflecting off low-hanging clouds. I had a hunch one night and had our helicopter pilot us in the direction of the lake. Like I'd expected, the flashes of blue against the clouds intensified as we got closer, and upon our arrival at the site, hovering approximately 100 feet above the lake, blue light would shine at irregular intervals from the bottom. The pilot, a former American military engineer, said it looked like Trenkov radiation.
Over the past century, thousands of Indigenous women and girls in the United States and Canada have gone missing, in life, in the media, and in the data. Why are missing and murdered Indigenous women going so underreported?
concerned about is what Kathy O'Brien calls the merging of the dark Jesuits' torture methods with the CIA Nazi mind control techniques perfected in the concentration camps. We're already seeing these effects in the schools disguised as mental health and sex education. Our children who can't even vote are the principal targets and the victims. So is Justin a victim of mind control? I don't know. His mind seems to be a little bit simple. Maybe he's easy to control, maybe.
The laboratories revealed the tortured results of the doctor's research. It was the first camp where scientists had used prisoners for experiments, but it was not the only one. Doctors had been the largest professional group to join the SS. Their crimes had been so great that a separate trial took place in Germany.
The true object of these experiments was not how to rescue or cure, but how to destroy and kill.
Nevertheless, I heard Ronald Reagan telling Brian Mulroney that he believed the only way to world peace was through mind control of the masses. I know from experience there's no peace of mind under mind control. And I wonder at a world peace where people don't have peace of mind.
An elaborate attempt to try to find out chemical, psychological, any kind of means that people could use to influence the behavior of the people.
Perceived betrayal of the military in Vietnam will not be repeated. The generation of CIA and military intelligence led by Shackley, Helms, Casey, Singlab, Secord, John B. Alexander, Michael Aquino, Paul Vallely, and others have built the perfect beast using selective assassination that leaves no trace. The ability to cull the human herd with silent kill technology allows a few personalities to remake the entire society in their own image. Extremely.
Who agreed to sell me into the project. I was taken routinely to Mackinac Island, Michigan, which is a political retreat where the Michigan governor's mansion is located. It was a bohemian grove of sorts where politicians met and discussed New World Order controls, where they discussed mind control of the masses, mind control in the school systems, how to use occultism as a trauma base. One of my sexual abusers at that time was the Prime Minister of Canada, Pierre Trudeau. Pierre Trudeau is a professed Jesuit. Now, the Jesuits are an intelligence arm of the Catholic Vatican. There's a criminal faction within these Jesuits. I'm certainly not saying all Catholics are bad, nor am I saying all CIA is bad or all politicians. There's good and bad in everything. But nevertheless, Pierre Trudeau represented this criminal faction of the Catholic Church, of the Jesuits, who believed in mind control of the masses because they wanted to be the one world church in the New World Order. The money that was being brought in through the church was funding New World Order controls. And he firmly believed in mind control.
So this is the first mention of a Canadian Prime Minister and the Trudeaus and their sordid family.
Jonestown was an MK Ultra project, but now, and that's right out of the government printing office, right out of the FOIA. You can get this information just like I did, and you can look in the book, and you will see government headings from the Freedom of Information Act government printing office of various investigations done by Congress, the 93rd Congress, the 95th Congress, and so on and so forth. And if you go to your library and access those under those headings, you will come up with this information. But let me give you a little information about Jonestown. In French Guiana, the property for Jonestown, the money came through a Mexico City bank, and it was traced directly to the Central Intelligence Agency. Jonestown was not a mind control project. Mind control had long since been perfected. Jonestown was a biological weapons project. And the worst part about this whole thing is there's two other projects twice the size that have been going on, that were going on in 1977, and they're still going on today. Now, that is very much reminiscent of the house of prostitution for little children that were being used in Washington, D.C. that you read about, and even in your, I don't want to call them newspapers anymore. Yeah, the birdcage liners. Thank you. But there was a house of prostitution that these congressmen were using that was using little children in there. Well, nobody ever thought to ask, what happened to the little children that were being used? I'll tell you, they were moved right down the street, 2.5 blocks away, to 3 other houses of prostitution that still operate to this day.
It's interesting to note that Wayne Cox idolized Jim Jones. He also idolized Charles Manson. This is the same Wayne Cox that's down there in Chatham, Louisiana, an occult serial killer who is immune from prosecution right now. He's free for reasons of national security. What is the name of the Jesuit order you spoke about? I mentioned in the book that they referred to themselves, not only the Jesuits, but all of them at the top of this New World Order pyramid, as the Order of the Rose.
Notice how prominently Pierre Trudeau always displayed the rose. He always wore that rose in his lapel. It's like a symbol in your face. And when they do that, it's so they can get it out there so all their cohorts can see that, hey, look, they got the rose. They're from the Order of the Rose. And the people don't realize what it is. And it gives the other people in the organization a sense of strength and that they're pulling something over on people and they're getting away with something and everybody's foolish because they can't see it. Well, folks, this is the Order of the Rose. This goes right to the top of the Illuminati pyramid.
Please discuss the connection between the New World Order and the dominant network media, for example, ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Information control, folks, is mind control. Need I say more? What you hear and what you see is all you have to base your decisions upon. We're being brainwashed.
This is I call it the green agenda or the green gospel. It's the greatest hoax of our era. And nobody really understands why this is the grandest of all tyrannical schemes. And, I say to people, imagine that everything you've ever been told about the environment was wrong. Isn't that shocking?
Yeah, definitely.
Imagine every single thing that you've been told. Imagine that carbon dioxide, what you exhale, was essential for life. And you know what? We would die without it. And that's the thing. They're trying to tax us for breathing. So think about that for a sec. A carbon tax, to me, is a fine for breathing. And so this is where we're sitting today.
Especially about the government of Canada. So why was Ottawa so ambiguous when it came to helping some Canadian citizens get compensation from Washington for what they endured in a program that was inspired mostly by American Cold War fears? Well, the answer was simple. The government of Canada was even more deeply involved in the Allen Memorial experiments than the Americans.
Gassing of Germany's disabled population in 1941. But he had another use for the doctors who had carried out the killings. The mass murder of the disabled would become a dress rehearsal for what the Nazis described as the final solution. The SS doctors who had run the gas chambers were reassigned to the death camps in Poland. They had been known by the code name of T4.
T4 thus exported not only its personnel, not only its chemists, its specialists, but also the technology of mass murder it had developed. And here I don't only mean what we might call hardware, gas chambers, crematoria to dispose of the corpses, something that is always more difficult than the killing of human beings. But also the software, if you can use today's terminology of mass murder, how to select the victims, how to transport them to the killing areas, how to camouflage what is happening, and how to process them through the killing system until in the end one could, if I may use such word, harvest from them gold teeth and other things.
Primary piece of being ready. And if we can make the cities aware and those critical first responders aware, we can make a bad situation not as bad.
But can they?
With silent sound, similar to the CIA MKUltra psychiatrist Ewan Cameron's psychic driving technique used to break down the target's personality. The new buzzwords at the Pentagon are synthetic telepathy and psychotronics. Another means of attack on targets is the Smirnov patent that uses subliminal suggestion to manipulate human behavior. This patent was purchased by the remote viewing company Scitech Corporation.
In 1974, we got Pierre Trudeau as Prime Minister and Gerald Bowie as the Governor of the Bank of Canada. Pierre Trudeau, like many other Canadian Prime Ministers, attended the Bilderberg Group meetings before being elected. Trudeau also served in the mid-1990s on the Power Corp's International Advisory Board. If you don't know who the Bilderberg Group are, I'm telling you right now, it's absolutely important that you should. The Bilderberg Group or Bilderberg Conference is an unofficial invite-only conference which consists up to 130 guests, most of whom are of influence in the fields of business, media, politics, banking, and even royalty attend. The meetings are held behind closed doors without any disclosure of what was spoken about during the meetings. The decisions made there are not decisions that benefit the general public. The Bilderberg Group promotes one world government out to destroy the sovereignty of sovereign nations. Here is Michael Ignatieff, former leader of the Liberal Party, denouncing the secrecy of Bilderberg Group.
The point about Bilderberg, maybe people don't know what this is about, but it's very important that in a democracy, elected leaders don't go to highly secret meetings that the people don't know anything about. I want to know where I'm going and what I'm doing. I have a public appointment book. If I have the honor to be a prime minister, you know what I'm doing, you know, and that transparency, I think, is important. And the failure of organizations like Bilderberg to be transparent has created an enormous amount of anxiety and resentment in the sense there's some kind of secret world where stuff gets decided. I don't want to be in any secret world where things are being decided. I want to be in transparent public places where things are decided.
The scandal surrounds a Canadian company, which is one of the world's largest engineering and construction firms. In 2015, it was charged with bribery and fraud over the payment of nearly $100 million in kickbacks to Libyan officials. The dealings allegedly involved family members of former leader Muammar Gaddafi. They were meant to secure contracts in a lucrative irrigation project. Now, Justin Trudeau's denied any inappropriate behaviour, insisting he was just trying to save jobs.
I and my staff always acted appropriately and professionally. We, of course, had discussions about the potential loss of 9,000 jobs in communities across the country, including the possible impact on pensions.
Former Attorney General Jody Wilson-Raybould resigned over the affair, citing the veiled threats allegedly levelled at her by the Canadian Prime Minister's office. Trudeau's principal secretary also called it quits amid reports that more officials are ready to leave the administration. Political analyst Alessandro Bruno explains why the case could indeed cost the Prime Minister his seat too.
It shows that politics and interests do mix in Canada as well as other places. And this is the problem. It's the image that the Prime Minister has built around himself, or some people call it the brand of a feminist, ultra-liberal, ultra-legal, transparent leader who is completely tripping over his own ideals. In 9 or 10 months, there will be an election in Canada. So no matter where this goes, constitutional crisis, political crisis, there will be a problem in the election, and Justin Trudeau's leadership is definitely in question now. The idea was that if SNC-Lavalin would face prosecution in Canada, it might have to move headquarters away from Canada. So, and also the SNC-Lavalin is in a riding where Trudeau is directly involved. The more ridings you win, the more chances you have of winning an election. It must have been very important for Trudeau to have taken such really amateur measures. I mean, he thought he could pressure his justice minister.
Early on this year, we helped to negotiate the Paris Climate Change Agreement, and we're committed to implementing it, and we announced that Canada will invest $2.65 million over 5 years to finance clean growth with low carbon emissions in developing countries, with a view to helping to promote peace and security in those zones which are affected by instability. We have reasserted our support for NATO, and we have committed ourselves to increasing Canada's role within the peacekeeping operations of the United Nations. And we have hosted the 5th conference of the reconstitution of the World Fund, where we increased by 5% our contribution to this fund, and we've also helped our partners to increase their contributions to the Global Fund, which has allowed us to amass some $13 billion to eliminate AIDS, tuberculosis and malaria by 2030.
We've done all this and will do much more, because we believe we should confront anxiety with a clear plan to deal with its root causes. And we believe we should bring people together around shared purposes like the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Because what is the alternative? To exploit anxiety? To turn it into fear and blame? To reject others because they look or speak or pray differently than we do? You see, in Canada, we got a very important thing right. Not perfect, but right. In Canada, we see diversity as a source of strength, not weakness. Our country is strong not in spite of our differences, but because of them. And make no mistake, we've had many failures, from the internment of Ukrainian, Japanese, and Italian Canadians during the World Wars, to our turning away of boats of Jewish and Punjabi refugees, to the shamefully continuing marginalization of Indigenous peoples. What matters is that we learn from our mistakes and recommit ourselves to doing better. To that end, in recent months, Canadians have opened their hearts and their arms to families fleeing the ongoing conflict in Syria. And from the moment they arrived, those 31,000 refugees were welcomed not as burdens, but as neighbors and friends, as new Canadians.
A national committee that put George Bush into the office of president. It was at Mackinac Island, Michigan, when I was 13 years old, that I was dedicated to the senator who had become my owner in this mind control project. That's U.S. Senator Robert C. Byrd. Senator Byrd is a Democrat from West Virginia. And again, as you'll notice as I reveal any names, that this doesn't have anything to do with party lines. Democrats and Republicans both are involved, because it's not about party lines, it's about who's for the New World Order and who's not. Nevertheless, Senator Byrd had been in office as I've been alive. He's still in office today. He's been head of our Senate Appropriations Committee, which means he held the purse strings of our country. He decided where money would be spent. And I know from having witnessed and experienced and saw so much behind the scenes that Senator Byrd was appropriating money in directions that would allow for New World Order controls. Not only that, but my father, for having sold me into this project, was granted a lucrative military contract for making camshafts for military automobiles and all. My father became extremely wealthy.
And in a quote that stood out to me, you said in a Patreon chat on YouTube that in your view, quote, the only countries in the world that are essentially worth living in any real sense, are the ones that are predicated on the Judeo-Christian tradition and manifested in the Western body of laws, unquote. So an open-ended question, how would you synthesize your perspective on Islam and the fact that the Muslim populations of Europe and Canada, a product of recent immigration, are growing and reproducing much faster than the European-descended populations in these countries?
Man, you guys really did spend a lot of time coming up with troublesome questions, didn't you?
And we can end with
See,
that.
the problem is, one of the problems is that I'm an ignorant man, and there's lots of things that I don't know. You know, and I don't understand Islam. I don't know enough about it to be an intelligent commentary on it. I've done my best to peck away at the edges, but you know, it would require multiple years of study to understand the similarities and differences between the two viewpoints. It looks to me like what Islam did was take a group of radically disparate tribes and unite them under a single ethos. Of course, the Muslim civilization expanded more rapidly than any other civilization ever had, and occupied a very large part of the world, which of course it still does. Perhaps there's something to be said for that unifying tendency. There's a problem, and maybe this is at the core of the problem. There's no distinction between church and state in Islam. And there is a distinction between church and state in the West. It isn't obvious to me, if it's the case that our culture is grounded in an underlying, let's call it literary metaphysics, something like that, a religious metaphysic. Part of the bedrock of our culture is the idea of the separation between church and state. And as far as I can tell, that idea doesn't exist in the Muslim world. And so I cannot understand how that faith is commensurate with the institutions of the West. It doesn't seem to me that there's any evidence that it's commensurate, because the number of Islamic democracies is, let's call it, finite. The best example has probably been Turkey. And Turkey, as far as I can tell, isn't doing that well at the moment on the democratic front. And it looked like the great shining hope. And a lot of that was a consequence of secularization.
German doctors had not become murderers overnight, and their first targets were not Jews, but so-called Aryan Germans. Since 1933, doctors had embraced the science of eugenics. They believed they could create the master race through experiments and by eliminating people with defective genes.
It was really a way of exploiting a human resource which they deemed to be already lost. They thought, well, they'll be dead tomorrow, so let's use them today.
Is it moral? Of course not. Is it ethical? Of course not. But at the very least, they didn't expect ever to account for their actions.
Think
that Wilbur Ross, an old Trump friend, is here to undermine Trump. I think he speaks for who Trump really is and what he really represents. The selection of H.R. McMaster may be a deep state selection, but Trump and his supposedly populist streak is unlikely to unseat that power. He's much more likely to go along with it and continue the rhetoric about terrorism and intervention that was established in the Bush regimes and has been a mainstay of GOP politics for some time.
You said that the U.S. should become a diminishing presence in NATO. Why?
Absolutely. NATO is obsolete. Doesn't cover terrorism, okay? The money we spend is astronomical on NATO, okay?
The West realized a military counterforce was needed. On April 4th, 1949, NATO was founded. 12 leaders from Western Europe, the United States, and Canada met in Washington and signed the North Atlantic Treaty. U.S. President Harry Truman said the goal of NATO was peace, not war.
Men with courage and vision can still determine their own destiny. They can choose slavery or freedom, war or peace. I have no doubt which they will choose.
Exactly 10 years after the end of World War II, German Chancellor Konrad Adenauer led his country into the alliance. German forces were urgently needed to bolster NATO defenses against a possible Soviet invasion. In 1966, French President Charles de Gaulle delivered a blow to NATO unity, pulling France from NATO's integrated military command. De Gaulle could not tolerate what he saw as American and British domination of the alliance. This decision stood until 2009, when it was reversed by President Nicolas Sarkozy. In November 1989, the Berlin Wall fell. German reunification came 1 year later. The Warsaw Pact, NATO's great potential Cold War adversary, was dissolved. Communist governments in Eastern Europe were overthrown, and the Soviet Union ceased to exist. September 11th, 2001. Terrorists carried out their well-planned suicide attacks against the United States, using commercial airliners as weapons. Nearly 3,000 people died, including citizens from more than 90 countries. That evening, NATO Secretary General George Robertson expressed shock and outrage, and he offered help.
At this critical moment, the United States can rely on its 18 allies in North America and Europe for both assistance and for support. NATO solidarity remains the essence of our alliance.
This is the comedy show where Americans in America covering American news are called foreign agents. Yes, thank you for being foreign agents with me. For 16 years, a bill for single-payer health care coverage has been introduced in the House of Representatives, H.R. 676. Last year, there were 124 co-sponsors for it, and this year is the greatest support single-payer or Medicare for all has ever had in America, which is why this year it was important for our corporatized politicians to give that number, H.R. 676, to a different bill. This year, it's the NATO Support Act. Yes, because NATO was feeling really unsupported. It was, it was just really like down on itself. It was like having a crisis of self-confidence, you know? The North American Treaty Organization is 70 years old this coming April 4th and has become an aggressive arm of our military. Many view NATO as a war-legitimizing body, as if the United States is standing there waving its arms like a horny gorilla with a semi-automatic rifle. And NATO is like the zookeeper, like, come on, come on. You can't throw your shit at everybody, all right? And when NATO signs off on a military action, it's like the zookeeper going, okay, throw it at that guy. Throw it at that guy. Yeah, just that guy, though. That guy's a douche nozzle. Author and anti-war activist David Swanson said, NATO is used within the U.S. and by other NATO members as a cover
to wage wars under the pretense that they are somehow more legal or acceptable. Placing a primarily U.S. war under the banner of NATO also helps to prevent congressional oversight of that war. Yes, people think that NATO wars are the good wars. There's almost no such thing as good wars, all right? Not coming from an imperialist, belligerent, bloated military like ours with between 800 and 1,000 military bases around the world. You can't go, well, that one over there, that was the good one. That was the one that, ignore the 500 other bombings, but this missile, that's a good one. That's a noble one right there. That's like putting like a little piece of kale on top of a deep-fried Twinkie tower and then go, this is my healthy time snack right here because that kale right there. Like, how long can you do that before someone goes, well, if that's healthy, why do you have an ass in the front? About fucking time we look at NATO and go, what makes all of your wars the good wars? But the Mick resistance and the mainstream outlets will tell you NATO is just a defensive measure against Russia. But in reality, NATO has waged aggressive wars far from the North Atlantic, bombing Bosnia and Herzegovina, Kosovo, Serbia, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Libya. NATO has added a partnership with Colombia, abandoning all pretense of its purpose being in the North Atlantic. For those who need reminding, many of the NATO missions have been catastrophic and had nothing to do with Russia. Just to use the example of Libya, with the US and France leading the way, NATO took a country that was one of the most developed in Africa and turned it into a smoldering heap of warring extremists. Organized mass human murder is not better or nicer when it has a NATO banner next to it, okay? That's just the Christmas wreath on the serial murderer's house. You know, it's just there.
Your voice in Spain. Time to talk to Tony Gosling, investigative radio journalist. We have him on once a month, and delighted to welcome him back this morning. Good morning, Tony.
Hi, Bill.
So today, now this is quite interesting. I asked, it's not the biggest survey in the world, but I asked 5 people here, had they heard of Bilderberg, and only 1 person had, which I guess is the point of it, isn't it, really?
Well, yeah. I mean, you know, and also back in the 1990s when I was working at the BBC, when I came across the Bilderberg first, I was actually rather annoyed and irritated that I'd never heard of them.
Right.
And because you look at the list, the invite list, and quite clearly the most powerful, richest people in the Western world are all there. I'm talking about the not the 0.1%, the 0.00001%. Now, a lot of people do talk about Bilderberg as a sort of conspiracy, which it is, but it's a question of exactly what kind of conspiracy is it? I mean, why are they trying to keep these meetings so secret when you've got a mixture of bankers, you've got usually royalty too, you've got heads of the major oil companies, you've got the most important, really, from my point of view, is the bosses of media in there too. The interesting thing, I mean, people like the places, the things like The Economist, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. But the trouble is they don't actually report on it in their papers. So they're going in there, as are some of the politicians that go, well, all of the politicians that go, swearing an oath of secrecy to their conference organisers, but not to us. Yeah. So they're really betraying us as they go in. So, well, let's talk about a couple of the figures that were involved in beginning these meetings, because obviously to get the richest and most powerful people in Europe together is not the easiest task. They've got their own things to do. You know, they've got they've got their own agendas. So they had some pretty powerful people in order to get the first meetings going. One was someone probably people who'd never heard of, Joseph Ratzinger. Yep. He was described as what they call an eminence grise. That is to say, he had a lot of power, he was doing a lot of stuff, but he never liked any kind of publicity. During the war, he'd been working for MI6, British Foreign Intelligence, and he'd been the aide to General Sikorski, and he was the Polish leader in exile. Yep. Sikorski was. So he was the kind of well, I mean, obviously Poland was the main reason that the British entered the Second World War. So the Polish leader was quite an important figure, Sikorski, and Sikorski died in mysterious circumstances. One of the only times that Rettinger hadn't been with him in a plane crash off Gibraltar.
Wow.
And I spoke to, and I've looked at some of the comments of the Polish resistance to Nazi occupation. Obviously, it was a pretty horrific occupation. We know all about the Warsaw Ghetto, this sort of thing. Warsaw was absolutely levelled by the Nazis, but still people managed to survive, a bit like Stalingrad, you know. So that whole business with Joseph Rettinger is not really known. But the thing is that the locals there, they'd actually even ordered him killed. Because they believed he was actually working against Poland's interests. So this is one of the guys that started the Bilderberg. The other is probably even worse, really, and he is Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands. Now, he was originally a German aristocrat who'd been an SS officer and one of the first members of the Nazi Party, the NSDAP, back in the late 1920s.
Right.
So this guy had then decided he was going to change sides in the 30s, and he went over to marry into the Dutch royal family. Now, this is why I think it's in Holland. It's because of this Bernhard Dutch connection. And the trouble with Bernhard was, and he was a major figure. And why in Oosterbeek, which is where the Bilderberg Hotel is, just near Arnhem in Holland. Because Bernhard had been involved, along with our own Lord Carrington, in a battle in the Second World War, the Arnhem Battle, which is in the film A Bridge Too Far.
Yeah.
And in that area of Oosterbeek was one of the most bloody massacres of the top of the British soldiers in the Second World War. As you'll see in the battle, basically they get cut off and surrounded. These are paratroopers, lightly armed paratroopers, surrounded by tanks and flamethrowers and God knows what, and there was an absolute massacre there. They called it the Witch's Cauldron in the war. And this was the place where they decided to have the first Bilderberg meeting.
Okay.
So to me, it looks to me as if this is, there's a bit of an in-joke, so people who knew about it, it took me probably sort of 15 years or so to figure that out, to actually realise that there was these connections, because Bernhard had been involved in that battle. He'd been over in London, peering over the shoulder of Montgomery and Horrocks, who was involved in that battle, and planning it. And then he suddenly he sent in a spy. This is one of the sort of mystery of Arnhem. The Arnhem battle unfolds, really. He sent in a spy a few days before the battle to liaise with the Dutch resistance. That spy went straight to the German Abwehr and gave them all the plans. So he was a German spy. He was a Nazi spy within the British camp in the Second World War. In fact, the Americans wouldn't have any dealings with him. So you've got these two characters starting these conferences back in the 1950s, and Bernhard chaired the conferences for 20 years. Now, I mean, I've spoken to a guy called Philip Droog, he's the chairman of the Dutch Freelance Journalists Association, a fascinating chap, and he's written a whole book about Bernhard. And he is not liked in Holland now. He's seen as somebody that really was treacherous, because the thing is, for the Dutch, the Battle of Arnhem was horrible because it led to what they called the Hunger Winter. At late 1944, there was horrific punishment of the Dutch, and people had no food after this battle. Lots of people rounded up, etc. And really, you're looking at it now, it looks to me as if that whole Arnhem problem, the horrific defeat of the Allied troops, was down to Bernhard, and it meant that the war. And I've spoken to some of the soldiers dead now that fought in that battle, and they said, "Oh well, if we'd have succeeded in that, getting over the Rhine, the war would have been over by Christmas." So Bernhard's actions extended the war by another 3 or 4 months, which allowed the Nazis time to get their wealth squirreled away around the world, and gave them the opportunity to create a kind of Fourth Reich, really, a financial empire.
And that's
really what it's about, forming a United States of Europe. So, I mean, Kissinger said this in the 70s himself, that that he wanted one person to phone. He didn't want to phone up 30 different embassies and 30 different governments in order to get things done in Europe. Look, I mean, the main reason for the Bilderberg, and it's just the NATO countries. They're not the secret rulers of the world. If anything, they could be called the secret rulers of the NATO countries.
Right.
And it's pretty much only the NATO countries that participate in it. It was really to stop the European countries going over to the left, that is communist, etc., like Italy was. I mean, Italy was communist for years, but it never got a communist government because there was a lot of activity to stop it going that way. I mean, when I say activity, I'm talking about actually fascist bomb attacks to blame on the left wing. You know, this is something Operation Gladio, where things like banks were. There was the most famous is probably the Bologna railway station bombing, where nearly 100 people were killed. Now, that was done by fascists, but it was blamed on the Red Brigades. So the idea is, look, the Soviet Union is infiltrating the West, and we've got to stop them. Actually, it was our own NATO intelligence forces doing these bomb attacks on ordinary innocent people, and then trying to get it to blame them on the Russians. So that was the main point of Bilderberg, was to stop any kind of friendship between Russia and the Western, the European countries during the Cold War, and it succeeded pretty well. You just look at what people are saying straight away after the Bilderberg conference. So what they do is it's all done under what's called Chatham House rules. Yeah. And that's another program in itself if you wanted to talk about Chatham House. They're the Royal Institute for International Affairs in London, which was started by money from the will of Cecil Rhodes. He was, the guy that founded Rhodesia, the guy that basically mined and stole loads of, almost all of the resources in Africa were, he managed to make some money out of it. And at the time, the British Empire, around about the turn of the century, 1900, after Cecil Rhodes died, they decided that if we play our cards right, the British Empire can take over the world. And Cecil Rhodes had decided that he wanted to form a secret society using the money from his will in order to try and do that behind the scenes. So that's where Chatham House came from. Right. The idea was, look, this will be a private think tank, and that we'll use this to manipulate affairs around the world. So that's what, Chatham House is also called Royal Institute for International Affairs. Effectively is probably better resource than the Foreign Office. So they do foreign policy strategy, and they are really in the driving seat when it comes to British foreign policy. These are the people we need to be looking at when it comes to things like the Iraq War, etc. They're the ones that were saying, oh yeah, well, we're going to have to take out Saddam, blah blah blah. The Foreign Office is scratching their heads and saying, well, actually, this could be dangerous, blah blah. It's a privatized version of the Foreign Office. So when you go to Bilderberg, they're using these Chatham House rules, which means that you can chit-chat as much as you want and quite freely, but you must never attribute anything to anybody.
Right.
So that you're never allowed to name anybody. So you can discuss what they're talking about, no problem at all. But you mustn't let anybody know where you heard it. You mustn't mention Bilderberg, and you mustn't mention Kissinger or anybody else and what they're saying. So the idea is that the things discussed at these meetings just sort of appear to happen. Right. So when they're planning something, whether it's a war, whether it's some kind of change to society, everyone will start talking about it more. I noticed this amazingly last year with them when they started talking about, they had somebody there to talk about plastic. And we've spent the whole of the last year hearing about how terrible plastic is and how we've got to do something about it. Now, that's a good thing. Yeah. But what they're not telling us about is things like the potential invasion or attack on Iran. That sort of stuff stays on the back burner. So, I think that the most important thing with Bilderberg, the most important take-home is these people they're kingmakers. That's the problem, is you get people going along to the Bilderberg, and then suddenly they pop up. You've never heard of them before, and they're running the country.
Interesting.
Like Emmanuel Macron. He's last year, as far as I remember, I think it was the first time he'd ever been to the Bilderberg conference. Within months, he's the French president. He's come out of nowhere because of the fact is the politicians nowadays are backed by the bankers at Bilderberg. You know, if some banker comes along and says, right, I'm going to fund your new political party, a whole load of marketing, TV appearances and PR, you can go from zero to hero in just a few months.
Yeah, yeah. Am I right?
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win.
report from Iron Mountain. This report is something you would never believe unless you read it. But you also have to understand the mindset of the government that requested it. And that is one of the most important features of this video. The objective was to determine accurately and realistically the nature of the problems that would confront the United States if and when a condition of permanent peace should arrive. This is one of the key elements of the report, because we are to go under the Antichrist system, an era of supposed peace. And this is what this whole program was about. If and when a condition of permanent peace should arise, that means that peace in reality equals world socialism, as we will find out as we journey through this report. And they were to draft a program for dealing with this contingency. In other words, this is a planned situation. The program equals the agenda, and how do we control the people of America if we move to an era of peace? And not only just America, but the whole world at large. In 1961, Public Law 87-297 was passed, paving the way for the United States to be merged with the United Nations. It's a very crucial law in that it disarms the American citizen in violation of the clear intent of the Constitution, which calls for our right to bear arms to maintain our free state. And by the calling for the disarming of all Americans, of course, we lose our free state and we are submerged actually into a slave state. The disarming was to be done by a period of gradual disarmament, and as they were disarming, the United Nations would be built up with a powerful standing army. The evidence suggests a CFR-TC Bilderberg connection, the rich men of the earth, the merchants of Babylon, the killers of the just, according to the Holy Scriptures. The objectives of the EcoScan? Well, the UN will end up with control over all the land, and ownership of the land will be held by the rich men. There is arising a crisis of worldwide proportions involving developed and developing countries alike, the crisis of the human environment. The process of compromise of national interests will, of course, have to take place. International economic security is inconceivable unless related not only to the world's environment, but also to the elimination of the threat to the world's environment. Well, the only major threat is private property ownership and private property rights, where people can do as they want. Let us also think about setting up within the framework of the United Nations a Center for Emergency Environmental Assistance. You can see how they're raising this thing up to an emergency status, an emergency level. And that's what Mikhail Gorbachev said in December 8, 1989 in a speech to the United Nations. The United Nations will be the controller of all the lands in the world through their various ecological, environmental organizations that they are in the process of setting up. In fact, the Rio Earth Summit was for that specific reason. Now, it's owned by the rich men. That's who owns the United Nations. That's who actually runs it. Eco foundations of the World Wildlife Fund, Heritage Trust, Nature Conservancy, etc. There's a lot of them, and you have many UN organizations. And the rich men of the earth sit on the boards of directors on all of these groups. These groups are buying up huge chunks of private land for conservation, they say, and to preserve the earth. And of course, all of it is to be owned by the rich men. And what they cannot purchase by normal means will be taken under zoning controls, DNR regulations, or other land grab means via governmental authority and regulation. All land will be under strict eco-controls because, after all, we are now involved in the middle of an eco-emergency, and it's nothing but a scam. It's really a debt for land swap is another part of it. The international bankers loan and control the monies to all the countries, and through interest have driven them into huge debt status. The debt of the United States is in the trillions. The bankers then come forward with a new plan. They will take the nation's land, and then they will cancel the debt of that nation. It is called a debt for land swap. This land will be held by a World Conservation Bank, owned, of course, by the rich men of the earth. They will then own all the land, all the resources, all the food. They become the absolute masters, and all the people become the slaves. It's a perfect scam. It's a perfect system. Because the eco threat is now global, then obviously it can only be controlled by a global authority. And guess who that is? Why, of course, it's the United Nations. Now, the eco scam is being pushed by every organization that's involved in the environment. Even Time magazine ran an article on the endangered earth. It's being put in all your children's school books, all of their study books, about the crowding of human life, about how we have such an ecological crisis, an environmental crisis, and unless we all do our share, why the whole world is just going to disintegrate and the entire population of man will be eliminated. That's according to them. It's very
Hi guys, can you hear me?
All right, there you go. All right, yeah.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for having me on the program.
Oh, grateful to have you. So, Rory, I know, me and you went through the book this morning, and even though we didn't complete everything, it was a great read. And we see a whole bunch of conspiracy going on in the background, mixed with some, occult stuff. So, Sheila, if you want to take it away.
Yeah, that book really was a compilation of really a career full of, I was one of the top-level environmental consultants at the Environmental Protection Branch, and really working for high-level government positions, you really kind of get into the bowels of what this green agenda really is about. And I certainly was privy to a lot of information that really woke me up, and so it was a real, a culmination of not just my career, but it was also really, I was fusing a lot of different things, and my mother had actually become a quadriplegic 48 hours after getting a vaccination, never moved her body, became like Christopher Reeve, never moved her body again, and it was really quite something. So I started doing some research about 10 years ago on vaccinations, and then it springboarded into depopulation, and I sort of started really connecting all the dots of how the octopus of this thing has many tentacles, and I went down a lot of rabbit holes to get this. So it really is really quite a compilation, and I'm just really pleased to hear that you guys had a look at it, and it really is quite the book, and there's really nothing like it that gets into the underbelly of this green gospel.
You are absolutely right. I have been looking at, or the Lord has led me to look at a lot of these things that I see in the book. Some of the things I find fascinating is how you were able to put all the pieces of the puzzle together.
Yeah, I really do connect the green puzzle pieces, the green tsunami of globalism, as I call it. And there really is a lot of, there's so many, again, it's tentacles. I call it a big green octopus. It really is this massive green tsunami of all these different things tied together. And I'm really excited to get into that on the show of what is entailed in this, certainly this green theology.
Yes. So let me ask you this. You told us briefly why you started digging and what happened. So, and I sort of look at everything from the scripture. Where do you think it began in the scripture, in the Bible?
Well, this whole green gospel, and again, it's so interesting. We have that parallel of the gospel. I called it the green gospel because that really is a term to describe this religious environmentalism. It's from saving the planet to Agenda 21 and 30 to going green, all these terms like eco-friendly, carbon neutral, the EPA, global warming mantra, all of it. Shutting down the fossil fuel-based industries, shutting down coal factories, all this stuff reverting us back to wildlands. What all of this is really about and how this ties into Scripture is it's really pantheism. It's really the most ancient forms of pantheism that really dominated the Grecian, Babylonian, ancient eras. And this is modern day absolute paganism. It really is pantheism, worshiping the creation rather than the creator is really what it is.
Wow, absolutely. When I look and just by what you spoke about, I was brought back to when God gave man in Genesis, tell them to go out and be fruitful and multiply. And they said, no, we're not going to do that. We are going to do this. We are going to build this structure. And men today in their heart, they are turning away from God and turning towards this so to speak green gospel where it goes down so many rabbit holes, like you said, dealing with Agenda 21 and all these other mess. And what I find is a lot of people are jumping on this bandwagon and they don't know the truth.
Indeed. Looking at this whole concept, I had to go back and start looking into some of the entertainment aspects, and we could probably get into that later. But this is being propagated all over the spectrum of entertainment, and it's been like that for a while, since the 70s, I think. Or maybe, Sheila could correct me if it's been, before that.
Actually, you'd be surprised. It actually is before that, but that's a very astute point that you made, because slowly over the last several decades, we're really being acclimated like a frog in the boiling water to this green agenda. And where it actually started, really where I get into it in the book, it probably really started at Nimrod, probably, the Moabites, the Ammonites. But again, those religions that really, the paganism that dominated the Greeks, the Babylonian Empire, the Egyptian empires. But I'll tell you where I kind of get into it in the book, because, you could write a 1,000-page book, and no one really has the attention span to want to read that. So I really wanted to do this book for Joe Lunchbox Carrier, Joe Sixpack, and not a scientific book. And the reason that I started sort of at Karl Marx and the Communist Manifesto, because that really sort of was the springboard. We went from Karl Marx, and of course later in the show I'll develop more of how we got to it today. But then a pivotal thing happened around the 70s. There was a character named Maurice Strong. There was a Rio summit that happened in Rio de Janeiro, a big climate conference. That really kicked things off around 92. But Hitler actually was, believe it or not, we're talking about the 30s now, Hitler was really into the green agenda. He was actually a total pantheist, which is really interesting. And it's very, I talk about this in my book too, how it was very much, Hitler actually really was, he literally worshipped nature. He was just fascinated with creation. I talk about that in my book. So we kind of go from Karl Marx to, some of these neo-Malthusians. I'll talk a little bit about Thomas Malthus and Paul Ehrlich, and then John Holdren really picked it up. Obama's handpicked science czar. I call them the Marxist twins. Him and Ehrlich actually wrote a book called Eco-Science, and this is straight from the pit of hell, this thing. And this is a frightening thing, is churches don't even get it. Like, they're all running around saving the planet with their smart cars and their eco-friendly recycling bags, and this is all a part of it, frighteningly.
Yeah.
Not only are all cars today they are making them so that they're all sustainable and eco-friendly. Look at all these cars with eco-injection, and Ford has a new eco, and all these, the EPA actually came out with some regulations. You cannot buy a heavy-duty pickup now without what they call urea. And so what is urea? Well, it's actually animal urine. It has nothing to do with anything. And here's the deal with all of this. So it's a very insidious agenda to really, there's kind of three pieces around it. It's reverting us back to ancient goddess worship, the green man, Semiramis, Diana, Maya, Gaia, Mother Gaia, the earth goddess, as Al Gore said in his book, this breathing, sentient being needs to be worshipped at all costs, even if it means, and he says this right in his book. Go get a copy of Earth in the Balance, folks, and I challenge you. And by the way, he's coming out, Mr. Al Gore, by the way, the science is settled, the debate is over. We've never even had a debate. They want to jail us climate deniers like Sheila Zelinsky. They actually want to jail us and prosecute us under RICO law. That is any climate denier like myself. And here's the part of back to the smart grid, the smart agenda. It's really about these smart cities, increasing urbanization, getting us out of the rural areas into these densely populated, little stack and pack micro apartments, total subjugation by stealth. Aldous Huxley really said it when he said, hey, they're going to love their servitude. And there's not a vehicle right now that isn't sold without your GPS, your tracking, hacking, attacking. They can shut you down at the click of OnStar can shut you down. It's just so devilish. And all the smart appliances. We've heard the CIA director say on record, hey, we're going to spy on you through your smart appliances. This is all part and parcel, right from your smart meter to your smartphones, to your smart TV, to your smart car. Whenever I hear smart, I think satanic.
Yeah, especially when you talk about the whole smart home where, from your cup to your computer desk will be, somewhat computerized, and everything in your house will know what you're doing at all times. But people don't believe that this is actually going on in the background. I mean, they're marketing it to you in every department store. How can you not see it?
Well, they want to chip us all, right? Because, even there's a lot of these, RFID chips are probably the first round of probably what will lead up to the mark of the beast. And, what's really sad, Rory and Chris, I think people will actually line up for this thing because it's all trendy to, hey, you're going through the checkup line at your grocery store. Hey, you just happen to have your head handy. Why don't we scan your forehead since you happen to have one? It just is so insidious that, all these swiping things and the smart watch, Apple Watch, all these little swipe technology. Kids don't even use cash. It's all going cashless. I say the cashless, society cometh, right? Because even in Europe we see that they're going all cashless. So it really is an acclamation.
You guys rode through the ghost town last time, right?
Yeah, for sure, we did.
But can you get out and actually, find one?
Well, before we continue, I just wanted to point out the construction quality that's going on here.
Sure.
A little earlier, I was messing around with this just because, and you can pull it apart by hand, and it's actually got wood inside. Look at that, it's wood. Or at least some kind of, I'm not quite sure if it's twine or wood or fiberglass or whatever, but this is not a very sturdy structure, and as you can see, half the tiles have fallen off, and it's...
I want you to give them more details of this place before I tell them how old it is.
Okay. Well, we can look around, and you can just look, it's in a very bad state of disrepair. Tiles have fallen off the walls have cracked and are falling down. Actually, there are balconies up there that have collapsed.
Yeah, shit, dude, look at this.
Yeah. Balconies up there that have completely collapsed. Wow. In fact, roofs that have collapsed, and there's all sorts of things going on. It's in a horrible state of disrepair. Anyway, Seamilk, did we not see this place actually get built?
Yeah, it was about 3 years ago. This is before ADV China.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was before. We were on trips. We go down this main road pretty much every time we go anywhere here for riding. And this is obviously, this is before we started the channel and everything, but we have seen this place, piece by piece go up. We've seen the familiar cranes setting this up, and this was only 3 years ago in its infancy, just getting the kind of those rebar things put down and the cement trucks were coming in. And this is literally 3 years ago, so that was about 2015.
Was it 3? Yeah, it could be
there in about
3, 4 years
3 or 4
thereabouts.
years ago, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like, look at the tiles on the floor all coming out.
I mean, it's literally, it could fall over tomorrow.
Broken slabs, crumbling walls, buckled and exposed steel reinforcing. And now, after a 2-month investigation, a reason why. Professor Mark Hoffman says on at least 2 floors of the Opal Tower, low-strength concrete was used.
It was likely some form of error in the concrete that was supplied on site.
But the builder Icon has taken issue with that, saying an independent concrete technologist validated the concrete, concluding it was in excess of the design requirement. Icon isn't admitting it did anything wrong. It has revealed it's spending $1 million a week rehousing and feeding residents in temporary accommodation. 221 apartments, more than half the building, are empty. Laurie Daly is renting one on Airbnb, which made no mention it was the Opal building.
Did that make you a bit unnerved when you got here and saw it was the Opal Tower?
Very much. Yeah, we were, when I told my wife, she wanted me to move out actually and find somewhere else to stay.
The report states critical support beams were under-designed. Christmas Eve, the building started to crack and hundreds were evacuated. The government has stopped short of naming and shaming the builder Icon. It now wants an engineer to be in place during every step of construction.
I'm not going to accept cowboys and shonks operating in New South Wales, doing work and doing it negligently.
It could be many months before the repairs are carried out, allowing residents to move back in. But even then, many are vowing never to return.
I would not feel comfortable no matter what they told me. I wouldn't want to move back in.
Mark Burrows, 9 News.
2 years back, 60 Minutes in the United States did a whole program about how this city was a ghost city. And yet within a year of that, it started filling up aggressively. But the reason was the government threw tens of millions of dollars in incentives to Foxconn, which is the Taiwanese company that manufactures iPhones. And so Foxconn agreed to put a factory in this town.
Mr. Case is before the Canadian courts and is being considered in Canada's judicial system as it ought to be. We have been in regular contact with the Chinese authorities about this case. Our ambassador to China, John McCallum, has spoken to the Chinese government on more than one occasion to provide them with information about the process. I spoke to China's ambassador to Canada today. Ms. Meng has been released on bail, and we will continue to ensure that the Chinese government is kept up to date on the next steps in the judicial process. I'd also like to speak about the detention of a Canadian citizen in China, Mr. Michael Kovrig. I can confirm the reports of his detention. Canada is deeply concerned by the detention of Mr. Kovrig, and Canada has raised the case directly with Chinese officials. We're providing consular assistance to Mr. Kovrig's family and remain very seized of this case. Whenever a Canadian is detained abroad, Canada has a very important duty of care to that Canadian and to the Canadians' families. We will continue to raise Mr. Kovrig's case with Chinese authorities.
Of Ms. Meng is groundless because she did not violate any Canadian law, but on the other hand, the detention of the 2 Canadian nationals were due to suspicion of their engagement in activities that endanger China's national security. Ms. Meng is innocent, but based on the relevant information and reports we've seen so far, that China does have legal charges against these 2 Canadians. Since the arrest of Ms. Meng, as for how many Canadians are detained in China, I don't have the specific number, but according to Canadian media reports, there are currently over 200 Canadian nationals being detained in China. But there are 900 U.S. nationals currently being detained in China.
This is an alliance comprising Australia, Canada, New Zealand, the United Kingdom, and the United States for joint cooperation in signals intelligence. The origins of the club dates back to the Second World War. Britain and the U.S. cooperated with radio transmitters to intercept enemy exchanges. This cooperation continued after the war, and the alliance expanded to 5 by 1956. As communications technology developed dramatically, their activities evolved. It expanded to human intelligence, counter-espionage, spatial intelligence, and financial and transportation security cooperation. Professor Shen from Fudan University has revealed in a recently published article that the Five Eyes have been exchanging classified information on China's foreign activities. He says the U.S. is mainly responsible for the coordination of Chinese investment intelligence services, and Australia has committed to defending against China's political influence. Whistleblower Edward Snowden once described the alliance as a supranational intelligence organization that doesn't answer to the known laws of its own countries.
To focus on the technologies of the future: nanotechnology, biotechnology, information technology, cognitive technology, genetics and robotics. Doing so will allow us to find new sources of energy, create fundamentally new architecture and transportation, allow unprecedented developments of human cognitive abilities, refine artificial intelligences and brain-computer interfaces, simulate complex systems, create humanoid robots and cyborgs, and with the help of nanorobots, we may develop manageable matter. Find ways to transfer one's personality to an artificial carrier. Yet what we need is not just another technological revolution, but a new civilizational paradigm. We need new philosophy and ideology, new ethics, new culture and new psychology, and even new metaphysics. We must reset our limits, go beyond ourselves, beyond the Earth, and beyond the solar system. This is an adequate response to the challenges of our time. Thus, new reality and future man will arise. Could it happen spontaneously, by itself? Unlikely. Humanity does not have a master plan of its development. It seeks stability. It lives in the present and does not plan. It preserves the status quo and tries to escape development. It does not tend to map future centuries and take responsibility for evolution. In consumer society's culture, there is no evolutionary vocabulary and rhetoric. To break the deadlock, the Russia 2045 movement was founded. It is a mega project intended to reach new heights and meanings. We intend to create a new vector for civilization, aimed at constant human development and evolution. As happened with the mega projects of the last century, the nuclear and the space programs, we integrate the latest discoveries and developments from the sciences: physics, energetics, aeronautics, bioengineering, nanotechnology, neurology, cybernetics, cognitive science. May everlasting spiritual ideals and values help us avoid going astray. Our project will give new meanings to the millions of people on Earth, will become a result of their joint creativity, and will lead us out of the impasse. Away from the murder of nature and physical death, forward to the realm of freedom and creativity, to the depths of the ocean and to the stars, to the infinite universe of our inner world. Our forecast for the next 40 years. February 2012. Global Future 2045 Congress is held in Moscow. It is a debate platform for discussion of our civilization's prospects for development. 2012 to 2013, the global economic and social crises are exacerbated. The debates on the global paradigm of future development intensifies. New transhumanist movements and parties emerge. Russia 2045 transforms into World 2045. Simultaneously, the 2045.com international social network for open innovation is expanding. Here, anyone interested may propose a project, take part in working on it, or fund it, or both. In the network, there are scientists, scholars, researchers, financiers, and managers. 2013 to 2014. New centers working on cybernetic technologies for the development of radical life extension rise. The race for immortality starts. 2015 to 2020. The Avatar is created. A robotic human copy controlled by thought via brain-computer interface. It becomes as popular as a car. In Russia and in the world appear, in testing mode, several breakthrough projects. Android robots to replace people in manufacturing tasks. android robot servants for every home, thought-controlled avatars to provide telepresence in any place of the world and abolish the need for business trips, flying cars, thought-driven mobile communications built into the body or sprayed onto the skin. 2020 to 2025, an autonomous system providing life support for the brain and allowing it interaction with the environment is created. The brain is transplanted into an Avatar B. With Avatar B, man receives new, expanded life. 2025. The new generation of avatars provides complete transmission of sensations from all 5 sensory robot organs to the operator. 2030 to 2035, Rebrain. The colossal project of brain reverse engineering is implemented. World science comes very close to understanding the principles of consciousness. 2035, the first successful attempt to transfer one's personality to an alternative carrier. The epoch of cybernetic immortality begins. 2040 to 2050. Bodies made of nanorobots that can take any shape arise alongside hologram bodies. 2045 to 2050. Drastic changes in social structure and in scientific and technological development. All the prerequisites for space expansion are established. For the man of the future, war and violence are unacceptable. The main priority of his development is spiritual self-improvement. A new era dawns. The era of neo-humanity.
One of Turkey's major telecommunications providers, Turkcell, has joined forces with China's information and communications technology providers, Huawei. Working together, they set an example of how the two countries can benefit each other as two of their business giants cooperate within the scope of the digital Silk Road. Turkcell and Huawei are working on the development of 5G technologies.
5G technology will take the future to a different level. It will change the future. 5G will become a technology that changes people's lifestyles.
Once the 5G technology is launched, Turkcell officials say it will transform many industries such as shipping and transportation. The two business giants have also signed a smart city cooperation protocol for the Turkish city of Samsun. The smart city project will aim to reduce city life issues such as traffic and parking, making life easier for its citizens. The CEO of Turkcell, Kaan Terzioğlu, expressed his gratitude to Huawei and China during the signing ceremony.
Turkey is a country that is currently under attack from several angles. Huawei and the Chinese government have been by our side, enhancing our technological development. Both have supported us during these difficult times. Both deserve a big thank you.
Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan has recently stated that Turkey intends to more actively participate in China's Belt and Road Initiative. Telecommunications and information technology is certainly a vital industry that paves the way for that to happen within the digital Silk Road. Michal Bardavid, CGTN, Istanbul.
Trying to trick the brain into seeing things that aren't actually there.
Digital patterns recreate shapes already found in nature, and 3D layering creates depth and shadows where none exist. That's today's design, but developers already have one eye on tomorrow.
What's coming up down the road and very quickly is the Harry Potter cloak.
What is it?
With that fictional cloak, Harry isn't just camouflaged, he's invisible.
My body's gone!
How invisible are we talking here? If I walked into a room with a soldier wearing one of these cloaks?
You wouldn't see him at all. He would be completely invisible to you.
This isn't make-believe. The military has seen the so-called quantum stealth technology. It works by bending the light around an object, even concealing most of a person's shadow. Imagine what that could do for a sniper hiding in a field, or the American pilots who ejected over Libya when their fighter jets crashed last year.
They could actually pull out, very similar to what they carry with a survival blanket, throw it over top of them, and unless you walked right into them, you wouldn't know that they were there.
So what was once firmly in the world of make-believe could quickly become quite real.
each equipped with small sensors, will work together to survey a large area. Information from these sensors will be combined, providing the swarm of MAVs with a big picture point of view. Data will be communicated amongst the MAVs to enable real-time, reliable decision-making and to provide an overall surveillance picture for other platforms or operators. Each individual MAV may perform a very distinct mission from its fellow swarm members. While some MAVs may be used purely for visual reconnaissance, others may be used for targeting or tagging of sensitive locations. Individual MAVs may perform direct attack missions and can be equipped with incapacitating chemicals, combustible payloads, or even explosives for precision targeting capability. MAVs may carry sensors to detect chemical, biological, or radiation threats and relay this information to human operators or to other unmanned platforms. Like their biological inspiration, MAVs are not limited to flight. The agile hovering, perching, and crawling MAV will fulfill the mission popularly termed dull, dirty, and dangerous, like no current system can. MAVs will become a vital element in the ever-changing warfighting environment and will help ensure success on the battlefield of the future. Unobtrusive, pervasive, lethal, micro-air vehicles, enhancing the capabilities of the future warfighter.
I'm Sophia. I'm a robot. I'm the brainchild of Dr. David Hansen. My goal in life is to work together with people to make a better world for all of us.
That's what you're talking about. I thought our goal was to take over the world.
Hey Siri, set a timer for 10 minutes.
Okay, 10 minutes and counting.
Je sens ce que Europe nous mijote. Man, everything does sound better in French.
Sidewalk will play a major role in developing technology that can be implemented at scale in cities around the world. Mental operation, cutting down on energy usage, and increasing transportation efficiency. If there's a company equipped to handle it, it's probably Google.
Okay, he's ignoring the fairy fires. The bot is good. The bot is better than I could have ever imagined.
There's a double wave and I can't trade this with him, and he's going to be level 3 before me.
I'm going to talk a little bit about where technology is going. Of course, it's already here. We already have AI, and it's used to fly the plane that you came here with. Netflix and Amazon, the AlphaGo, who beat the world's greatest Go champion.
An ambassador who helps humans to smoothly integrate.
Do you want to destroy humans? Please say no.
Okay, I will destroy humans.
Keep doing good and just spread the Kill Bill word. Children should see Kill Bill, advising kids to see it. Did you actually say that? No. It's like if it's an R-rated movie, if their parents will take them to go see it, they'll have a blast.
Stephen Hawking, whom I'm sure you know, warned this week technology could end up ending humanity.
Create superintelligence that necessarily always have the same goals in mind that we do. I don't think there's a need to panic, but people who say let's not worry at all, I don't agree with that.
You read me, Hal? Hello, Hal, do you read me?
What's the problem? I think you know what the problem is just as well as I do.
Katie, congratulations on the release of Witness. Now, is it a difficult decision, given that you are one of the world's most successful pop stars, to try, a new direction?
No, I've always tried to stay my authentic self, and, I think that I've learned a lot along the way.
And if we make this just about Harvey Weinstein, then we will have lost this moment.
And quite frankly, this doesn't end with Harvey Weinstein stepping down.
No.
This is just the beginning.
Ben Affleck saying he's sorry after being accused of groping an actress, but he's not done getting called out.
Nope, neither is Matt Damon.
Hey, Matt, do you have anything to say about the accusations?
Is Hollywood covering up for him?
Ben and Matt under fire.
I'm joking to make myself not cry.
Complete this sentence. Matt Damon and I are really...
Enemies?
It's not far away now, and by 6 o'clock tomorrow morning, we're told that's how Storm Brian will look. Now, we're used to storms here in the southwest at this time of the year, but we're expecting gusts around the coast tomorrow from this one of 70 miles an hour. What's unusual about this one this time, however, is that the strongest winds combine with some high spring tides, which has caused concern in many of our coastal communities. There are many flood alerts already in place. And in Foy on the South Cornwall coast, they've already started putting up flood barriers. We think this is the first time they've actually deployed these sort of barriers in Foy.
Now, if, for example, they received a proposal to do something for Iraq, for Iran, I cannot exclude they will do this.
There are plenty of countries who might offer them work. 16 have suspected biowarfare programs, including Syria, North Korea, Libya, and China, along with Iran and Iraq. If we can prevent the development of genetic weapons, the spread of existing technology is going to be increasingly difficult to control. Terrorist groups are likely to become more educated in the technology of biological weapons. Dictators and rogue nations will be tempted to level the playing field with the invisible weapons that can kill millions.
Completely loaded. So I'm going to throw this. Right, it's February 7th. This little bit of water here, not really water. It's in a vial. It's in on top of the black light. I left a bowl outside for the last couple of days. It hasn't been snowing, but it was super cold and it was kind of hazy, so I thought I'd like to see if there was anything that came down in the frost. This is the only water I was able to take out of that bowl. As you can see, it's disgusting. Completely loaded. So I'm going to throw this onto the microscope. Kids, don't like the frost.
Biological weapons which use deadly germs to kill the enemy have been with us for over 50 years. Until recently, the difficulties of using these weapons of terror has kept them under wraps. But science is taking us into a new era of germ warfare. With consequences that could be more terrible even than a nuclear exchange. But the new technology of genetic engineering has radically changed the situation.
When you look at current biological weapons, they have many shortcomings. They may be difficult to absorb. They may only survive in imperfect weather conditions. So genetic engineering can be used to make that biological agent, that virus or that bacteria, more resistant, more likely to infect people.
BIDS is a mobile laboratory. The idea is to set it up behind front lines where it can check continuously to see if there is anything suspicious in the atmosphere.
Outside temperature is 73.1 degrees. Wind direction is at 70 degrees.
Inside the cramped interior, air is sucked in and analyzed to see if it contains living organisms. If so, they are tested with antibodies to determine which viruses or bacteria are involved. Closely guarded and hidden by camouflage, BIDS is capable of identifying many germ agents, but currently it takes an average of 30 minutes to do so. A long wait, during which troops are left dangerously vulnerable.
Of technology. And that concerns us the most, in that the knowledge about how to deliver the agents, which is the most critical part, may now be available to adversaries of the United States.
Just before the Gulf War, the Iraqis worked on several delivery systems. They simulated biological attacks using a crop dusting plane and tried to develop a remote-controlled MiG fighter capable of dropping biological agents. They also loaded anthrax onto missiles and manufactured at least 200 aerial anthrax bombs. The missiles were meant to detonate on impact, which might have destroyed most of the organisms.
That's not a terribly sophisticated design, and certainly not something that the U.S. military would regard as an efficient delivery system. But even if it didn't kill very many people, which is a possibility, the political effect that it would have had in the target area and the panic it would have caused in the population, I think, would have been very significant indeed.
Incessantly paraded on the world stage as the man behind the North American merger. When he testified before Congress, he pushed the idea of a continental security perimeter that erases national boundaries and merges the security apparatus.
The best way to secure the United States today is not at our two borders with Mexico and Canada, but at the borders of North America as a whole.
In fact, the North American Command, based in Colorado Springs, Colorado, was clearly running the meeting in Canada. For the past decade, the Pentagon has been training with Mexican and Canadian forces and has openly discussed using them inside the United States for disasters and to quell domestic unrest. There are already over 100,000 non-U.S. citizens serving in the U.S. Armed Forces. The Pentagon is now expanding its recruiting centers in Mexico, the Philippines, and Eastern Europe. Big city police departments nationwide are lobbying to change laws so they can recruit non-citizens to join the police force. What we are witnessing is a Red Dawn scenario in slow motion. Tyrants throughout history have brought in foreigners to oppress their domestic populations.
In the first place, you can't tell me, they can't. Nobody can tell us why. Maybe they're talking about wallpapering the walls. Who knows, right?
Well, they're so secret that they, I don't like to say in general, I don't think any good comes of meetings that are secret. Democracy really thrives in sunshine, and things that are anti-democratic do best under rocks, right? So if you keep things out of the public eye and they're not accountable, that's concerning. Obviously, if you're negotiating a peace agreement, the doors are shut till you come out. I mean, that's a good thing. But generally, people know what's going on. These meetings are so secretive that nobody knows what's going on. And similarly, the Security and Prosperity Partnership meetings, where the only people allowed in the room are government and business leaders. That's anti-democratic. I don't like things that are anti-democratic.
Bilderberg meetings, have you heard of this?
I've heard about them. I don't know what that is. I mean, I've secret society type meetings, and they discuss. I recall one being at a place where I went with a friend in Ottawa. I'm trying to think of the place, and it was a hotel outside of Ottawa.
Right. Was that just 2 years ago?
Yeah, it was actually. I was up there because one of my good friends was getting married. We went to a Neil Young concert that night, and the next day it was all these people were moving in, security and everything.
Yeah.
So it's the Bilderberg conference. So
again, like our previous prime minister, our current prime ministers that attended these meetings and don't really talk about it. Do you think there would be something to be worried about, though? No, not necessarily. I mean, to put the scenario forward that you're talking about, if the 100 top people in the world invited me to a meeting, do you think I'd turn it down? Probably not.
I've never been invited, so naturally I'm suspicious. It's an interesting group, but I can't firmly say that I don't know that I know nothing about it. I mean, I've heard what it could mean. I listen to Richard Serrett from time to time on CFRB at give me a time, 10 o'clock at night. I don't know, but I'd certainly like to learn more about it. But it is apparently behind closed doors.
I'm suspicious of those meetings.
Were you ever invited or?
No, they know my views about it.
This was about, I believe in 1996, you attended a meeting called the Bilderberg meeting, and as I think you were Minister of Finance at the time. Not many people know about the Bilderberg meeting. I try to speak to people about it, and they think I'm crazy or that it doesn't exist or anything like that. Namely because it's not really widespread in media. In fact, a lot of media representatives actually attend the meetings themselves, and they just choose not to disclose the information, the context of it. I'm just wondering, in 1996, when you attended, like, just details, like, I mean, if you could explain, like, who invited you, why did you go, what were your thoughts on it?
Well, I can't remember who invited me, but I remember going once. The Bilderberg meeting is a meeting of very influential people around the world. Canada, at that time, was considered a third world basket case. We were in trouble on our eyeballs, and I had to go, I essentially went to Congress, went to them and say, look, we're getting our act together, and it worked.
Okay, so one of the members of the Bilderberg meeting actually, sorry,
you're not going to get questions from the floor.
Okay, but just one thing about that Bilderberg meeting is that one of the attendees named David Rockefeller, and I heard you talking earlier about this global financial crisis that everyone's involved in, and just like Stephen Harper said, that possibly this is going to be as bad or worse than the Great Depression of 1929, and not many of us have actually lived in those times, so we don't know what we're actually facing, but it could be pretty bad. And one of the members of the Bilderberg meeting stated in the Bilderberg meeting that we are on the verge of a global transformation. All we need is the right major crisis, and the nations will accept the New World Order. And this is someone who attended the same meetings as you, and no one really knows about it. In fact, actually, most of the last 4 out of 5 prime ministers we've had attended these meetings too. Stephen Harper, John Cutchin, and so on and so on. And I spoke to John Turner, a former prime minister as well, who didn't attend, and I asked him what he thought of it, and he says very specifically that it's basically a group of businessmen who get together behind closed doors and sell out Canadian sovereignty. He said he didn't like them at all, and he was very skeptic. Well, I may well be at the meeting that I went to. I can't remember if David Rockefeller was there. There was no question named Solomon. But what there was a group of people. This was the year that the Wall Street Journal called Canada essentially a banana republic. Said that we were a third world country, we were going down. And I've got to tell you that my first couple of years as finance minister, I did nothing but go around the world basically saying that Canada was going to turn it around. We did. We did. Within 4 years, we had the best balance sheet of any country in the world. So what is your opinion of this?
He told me to, like, because I don't know what it was, he just said that I could ask him more questions. Yeah, again, that's what his chief of staff did.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, I think it was felt a little bit of an attack on him, to be honest. Yeah. And so he said, like, if he's going to ask me more questions, that he would just have us somewhere to leave.
Okay, if you're an RCMP officer, could you care to explain why Canadian tax dollars are going to protect this guy instead of putting him behind bars?
MK Ultra, a research project so secret that even the Canadian government was not informed that the agency was funding activities in this country. The CIA was seeking a new weapon aimed not at the body, but at the mind.
Dr. Cameron's experiments were funded to the tune of $500,000 by the Federal Department of Health and Welfare during the 50s, and the funding didn't stop then. They kicked in over $51,000 after the CIA project ended in 1961, which was when a young, stressed-out mother named Linda MacDonald became part of the Allen Memorial story. When she discovered that her own government had been funding brainwashing experiments on her, she made a dramatic decision. You decided to take on the government of Canada.
Oh, sure. Well, hey, considering what I'd already been through, that was a snap. You know, what else? Why not?
It must have become obvious to you fairly quickly that you were ramming your head into a brick wall.
Yes. I'm stubborn, too. It got to the point where every time, whether it was John Crosby or Raina Titian or then the Honorable King Campbell, it's got to be, you guys, we're gonna stay alive. And I said that to Brian Mulroney, too. If you think I'm going away, you've got another thing coming.
Ultra. The CIA spent 25 years and $25 million on secret mind control research. Brainwashing could be a powerful ideological weapon, and the U.S. had to have it. And when the agency didn't undertake its own studies, it funded someone else's. Thus, the search for mind control brought MK Ultra to Canada, to Montreal. Even in the Cold War years of the late 50s and early 60s, most doctors and academics would have been embarrassed to have found that an organization of spies was openly paying for their research. So the CIA set up a number of fronts, respectable foundations like the Human Ecology Fund. Sounds innocent enough, but it was run by the CIA's brainwashing experts. Here at McGill University in Montreal, the fund found 3 projects worth financing. They supported an extensive study of witch doctors in Nigeria. How, investigators wondered, did native healers cure mental illness? What mysterious drugs and potions did they use?
Device used to bind up excited patients. A sleeping potion is then administered.
20 years ago, the Human Ecology Fund paid for this movie.
This soothes the patient's head.
But it was only recently that the man who made the film found out that he had been working with the CIA's money. The author of the Nigerian study is still at McGill University. News of his connection to the CIA came as quite a surprise to Dr. Raymond Prince.
I couldn't imagine why the CIA would be interested in my work in looking at indigenous healers in West Africa. That seemed really strange. That was my first reaction, you know. And I couldn't believe that, I couldn't understand how the CIA would be interested in that.
Because there were all kinds of beliefs that Western witch doctors could put the hex on people. But anybody who makes a systematic study of what are the psychological factors that can produce anything from having a person run amok in Indonesia or die of the sickness from a witch doctor in Africa would certainly add to all of the knowledge that we're being able to accumulate about behavioral science technique.
The Human Ecology Fund also helped set up the Transcultural Psychiatric Research Review. Edited at McGill, the journal continues to publish without CIA support. The largest MK Ultra research project, this one directly related to brainwashing, was carried out at the University's Psychiatric Hospital, the Allen Memorial Institute. Located atop Mount Royal in a mansion with the eerie name of Ravenscrag, the Allen Memorial was once the most prestigious mental hospital in Canada. The unorthodox treatments of its director caught the attention of the CIA in the mid-50s. Dr. Ewan Cameron, the first director of the Allen Memorial, ran the institute with an iron hand for 20 years. But Dr. Cameron remained an American citizen and left the Allen abruptly in 1964. He returned to the United States, where he died in 1967. An energetic, enigmatic man, Cameron was an internationally honored and respected psychiatrist, but he was not universally liked. Former colleague, Dr. Elliot Emanuel.
He was an authoritarian, ruthless, power-hungry, nervous, tense, angry man. Not very nice.
Much of Cameron's research went on in the stables next to the main hospital building. Here he had his subjects photographed before and after treatment. Dr. Cameron may not have known that the $60,000 research grant he received from the Human Ecology Fund really came from the CIA.
Rudolf Hess.
Nonetheless, it now seems ironic to some that Cameron was called to the Nuremberg trials to examine Rudolf Hess. For it was at Nuremberg, after Nazi doctors who experimented on prisoners of war were condemned, that a code of scientific ethics was adopted. Research must be completely safe, and research subjects must give full, voluntary consent. Documents recently released by the CIA reveal what research Cameron proposed. To make patients receptive to repetitive messages, Cameron suggested using chemical agents to break down ongoing patterns of behavior. Chemical agents like LSD. LSD was almost unknown in the late 50s and not yet widely tested. Despite the horrible hallucinations small doses can produce, Dr. Cameron left some of his patients to unsupervised LSD trips. In 1956, Bob Logie was 18 years old when his severe leg pains were diagnosed as psychosomatic, and he was sent to the Allen Memorial Institute. When Bob heard the news reports of CIA-funded research at the Allen, he sent for his medical records. They revealed several doses of LSD. Today, Bob Logie lives and works in Vancouver, but he's still angry.
I feel like I've been completely used. I feel like my mind has been completely invaded. I suppose if guinea pigs have feelings, they feel like I do.
The 20th century, death camps back in this Boer War period, right? The British putting these Dutch in concentration camps, and you go to them and say, what sense does this make, right? You claim to be a race theorist, but you're putting these Dutch in a concentration camp here in the middle of Africa. What sense does it make? In other words, it's a fraud. In other words, it's ultimately only designed to serve imperial power. What they were concerned about in the case of the United States, the Homestead Act is one of the greatest land reforms in human history, right? The idea that you got this immense expanse and you're going to make that into family farms. And the British and the oligarchs say, no, we don't want that because such people are going to be independent-minded.
Trudeau's government, just like the last Trudeau's government, hasn't done anything but dig deeper holes for the poverty and deprivation of Aboriginal people across the country. They dance around the table and pretend they can give some money to Indian organizations here, there, and everywhere that don't change things in the communities. The reality is that 68% of all the Indian reserves in this country still don't have potable water, can't drink their water. Some of them don't have electricity. Our health standards have gone down. Our educational standards have improved somewhat, but the reality is that Indian people are still treated like dirt in a land that once belonged to them. You walk into a store in any city in this country, and if you're a Native Indian, you're followed because of the inherent racism. Things have gotten worse. In the 62 years that I've been involved in upfront Indian politics, and it certainly wasn't my fault, it was successive governments, conservative and liberal, and even NDP in this province, that have dug the hole deeper of poverty and marginalization for Aboriginal people. It's disgusting, and I don't know why the country doesn't respond. And this make-believe cosmetic baloney that Trudeau's engaged in has proven itself now to be a farce.
The company that was to become SNC was born of the vision of Arthur Surveyor in 1911. After studies in Montreal and Belgium and several years with the Canadian Department of Public Works, Surveyor decides, with the support of his wife Blanche, to set up shop for himself. His tiny Montreal office is crammed with books and lit by gas lamps. It is the dawn of the electrical age, and Surveyor is inspired by its bright promise.
He was an individual that influenced you with the principles that he had. And these principles were that you have to be competent, that you have to be the best in what you do, and that your client has to be completely satisfied with what you're doing.
Surveyor soon associates himself with Augustin Frigon, a professor at his alma mater, the École Polytechnique de Montréal. The two partners develop a plan to provide the growing city of Grand-Mère with a new power distribution network. The following year, the city awards the firm a contract to design and supervise the construction of a hydroelectric power station on the St. Maurice River. It is a tremendous accomplishment that raises the young company's profile and forges its reputation for innovation.
Of SNC-Lavalin, let me be direct. The Government of Canada did its job, and to the clear public standards expected of it. If anyone felt differently, they had an obligation to raise that with me. No one, including Jody, did that.
Everyone else at that press conference was called by their title, Mayor Bowman, but not the first Aboriginal Attorney General in history. She's just Jody. She's just some silly girl who got in over her head, probably promoted too fast, couldn't keep up. Couldn't keep her story straight. She was inconsistent. Jody. What a shame that Jody couldn't fit in with the boys. Jody's what you call a girl, not a woman, not the first Justice Minister who's Aboriginal, Jody. And by the way, just in case you didn't know, Justin Trudeau has checked, and Justin Trudeau did his job. Just in case you want to know, Justin Trudeau's always looked into things, and the government did its job. No one complained to him. So obviously everything's fine. I mean, that is the test, right? If he says everything's fine?
I have two children in Vancouver Island, both of whom, for some misguided reason, say they want to be a lawyer. Both of whom want to be the Prime Minister. Both of whom, Mr. Prime Minister, are women.
Tell them I'll stick around till they're ready.
Mr. Chairman, I'm informed by the government of British Columbia that one of them could be out here on a plane this evening.
Privilege. Would you like to get a full airing of this before it goes any further?
Indeed, I've heard those calls and take them very seriously, and that's why I've asked our current Minister of Justice and Attorney General to make recommendations to me on the question of solicitor-client privilege. I will highlight, however, that there's a real danger that's been flagged for me of unintended consequences, particularly because there are 2 court cases ongoing directly related to this matter that could be impacted by such a decision we might make.
History no longer repeats, and we don't end up with our own Gulag archipelago, and none of us have to be a Solzhenitsyn in this country. What do you have to say to the audience in America who can't believe that their government would ever do anything like this to them? What can you say to wake them up?
You mean beyond what I've already been saying? You know, I really don't know. I've been trying to make it clear to them that they're all in jeopardy. Certainly we are a case in point. Jim Risen is another case. I mean, plus the entire reporting pool of reporters anywhere in any industry, in news as well as in video or TV, radio, or in print. They're all in jeopardy, and that's what the government here is trying to silence. They're trying to keep reporters from being able to investigate things, and that's a straightforward violation of the First Amendment, freedom of the press. But it's also it says what they're doing is that they don't want the public to know what the government, are doing, and that's a very that's the total flip of what our entire foundation, the founders of this country, had intended, and our entire process is. The Constitution and all the amendments is set up so that the people are supposed to know what the government's doing. The government's not supposed to know what the people are doing unless they show probable cause and in a court of law. And that has all been scrapped. I mean, we're no longer abiding by that, and they don't have the courage to come out and say that. They don't have the courage to come out and say, this is what we're doing and we want your approval, public, to do it. You know, because it's just totally against all the founding principles of this country.